Hey there, this is Alexis Knight. Welcome to True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. I'm your host, guiding you through cases that have moved through the courts and reached a conclusion, but left the public divided. These are not your typical cut and dried cases. These are the ones where the facts may be clear, but the truth? That's another story. Now, picture this. You are at a small, dimly lit speakeasy in the heart of the Great Depression. You're nursing a drink when you overhear a strange plan. A group of men is plotting to make money off an acquaintance's life insurance policy. It sounds like something out of a crime novel, except this plot is real and their chosen victim has no idea what's coming. What would you do in this situation? Well, that is exactly what happened to Michael Malloy way back in 1933. But today we're going to dive into this case because it is one of the strangest cases of criminal intent. A bizarre plot that combined greed, desperation, and an astonishing series of failed murder attempts. This case left people wondering, was it justice? Fate? Was it something else? Stick with me here to uncover the details of this mind-bending story, where every twist seems stranger than the last. As we dig into this case, consider, when does the line between crime and fate become blurred? The court's made its ruling, but what do you think? Today we're going to dive into a case that has sparked endless debate. So listen closely, and by the end of this episode, you are going to have the chance to decide for yourself. Was justice truly served, or is there more to the story? Let's get into this. Okay, in 1933, Michael Malloy was a regular at a speakeasy in New York City. He was a man known for his rugged nature and fondness for drink. Malloy was an Irish immigrant, a former firefighter, and at the time, he was homeless. To many, he was just another face in the crowded streets of the Depression-era Bronx, living day to day, often on whatever drink he could afford. But in the eyes of 5 men who frequented that same bar, Malloy became the target of a dark and unusual plot. The men, later dubbed the Murder Trust by the press, hatched a plan to take out life insurance policies on Malloy, intending to cash in by having him meet an unfortunate end. The idea was simple: encourage Malloy to drink himself to death. After all, they reasoned, a man with such a reputation for hard drinking would succumb eventually. And if they did this, he'd go so quickly. They saw it as a very easy way to make a quick profit in a time when money was scarce. Yet what followed turned their plan into one of the strangest criminal cases in history. As they fed Malloy increasingly dangerous amounts of alcohol, expecting him to drink himself into oblivion, he continued to return to the speakeasy day after day, seemingly unharmed. It became a morbid game of chance, and Malloy's resilience was almost beyond belief. Each time he returned, the conspirators grew more desperate. How could one man survive so much? And at what point does a simple plan cross into something much darker? The failed attempts on Michael Malloy's life turned this plot into a deadly farce. Frustrated by his resilience, the conspirators escalated their methods, each more dangerous than the last. After trying to overdose him with alcohol, they moved to feeding him poisoned food, including raw oysters soaked in wood alcohol, and even a sandwich laced with metal shavings. But despite these drastic measures, Malloy survived, each time returning to the speakeasy as if nothing had happened. His seeming invincibility became both a frustration and a fascination, leaving the conspirators wondered if they could even ever succeed. As this dark plan continued, one can't help but wonder about the moral boundaries these men crossed. Did they see Malloy as a person? Had he become merely a means to their financial gain? The ease with which they repeatedly attempted to kill this man, while treating each failed attempt as a minor setback, revealed a cold disregard for human life. The public would later ask, what makes a person so detached that they view murder as just another obstacle in a get-rich scheme? The trust's methods grew more aggressive and absurd as time went on, pushing the boundaries of cruelty. This case raises a disturbing question. When does greed drive someone to lose all moral restraint? At what point does this happen? And what does that say about a person's character to repeatedly attempt murder for financial gain, treating each failure as a bump in the road? The group's fixation on killing Malloy became a spectacle, forcing the public to confront the grim reality of human desperation and moral decay. As their schemes continued to fail, the conspirators grew increasingly reckless. They moved from poison to extreme physical harm, attempting to freeze Malloy by leaving him unconscious in the snow, hoping the bitter New York winter would claim him. Yet to their amazement, he showed up the next day alive and still eager for another drink. Frustration turned to desperation, and desperation soon led them to a level of brutality they hadn't even initially considered. The group eventually decided to hit Malloy with a car, hoping to stage it as a tragic accident. But then, even this attempt fails. Each time this man survived, the case grew darker, as if fate itself was mocking their plans. What does this say about the human psyche that despite each failure, the group remained committed? For them, it was no longer even about simply cashing in. This was now about seeing this job through, even if it meant resorting to more extreme measures. As they escalated their efforts, questions of humanity and fate, morality, became even more pronounced. Malloy's resilience seemed almost supernatural, challenging the conspirators' determination and exposing the lengths to which desperation could drive them. The public would later ask, at what point does a person's focus on a goal, even a deadly one, override their sense of right and wrong? The case forces us to question the power of greed and the lengths people will go to satisfy it. Could anyone else be drawn down this path under the right circumstances? Or was this just a unique confluence of desperate men and a remarkably resilient target? Well, finally, after many failed attempts, the Murder Trust did manage to kill Malloy, ending one of the most bizarre murder plots in history. They succeeded by ultimately forcing carbon monoxide poisoning. Malloy's resilience had, in a twisted way, prolonged his life, but his luck eventually did run out. When the insurance companies investigated, suspicions quickly arose. Due to the unusual circumstances surrounding Malloy's death and the multiple insurance policies taken out by the same individuals, the conspirators were soon arrested and their plot unraveled under scrutiny. This outcome sparked a lasting debate. Did Malloy's persistence and near superhuman survival reveal a form of poetic justice against those who sought profit by killing him? Or did it expose something even more dark, that human greed can persist to the point of utter disregard for life? In court, the conspirators showed little remorse, their primary concern seemingly the failure of their plan, rather than any loss of human life. This response shocked the public, leaving people questioning the true depths of human depravity. How low can someone really go? And can this happen to anyone? The bizarre case of Michael Malloy forces us to consider very difficult questions about fate and morality and greed. Would the conspirators have acted differently in less desperate times? Did they begin to see Malloy's resistance as a personal affront, feeling their obsession to succeed at any cost? And perhaps most unsettling, how many people under similar circumstances might be driven to follow a similar path? This story is a reminder of how easily greed can distort judgment and turn a simple plan into a haunting example of human ruthlessness. It leaves us wondering, could something like this happen again? And what does it say about society's darkest instincts? In the depths of the Great Depression, life was tough, and many turned to desperate measures. Michael Malloy, a former firefighter in the Bronx, was one of many struggling to survive. He was known for his resilience, and he was also known for the love of his drink. Malloy was a regular at a local speakeasy run by Tony Marino. Marino, along with 4 others, Joseph Murphy, Francis Pasqua and Hershey Green, and Daniel Kreisberg. They hatched a scheme to cash in on Malloy's life, hoping that his frequent drinking habits would make him an easy target. They took out multiple life insurance policies on Malloy and planned to split the payout once he was dead. Their plan seemed simple. They would provide Malloy with unlimited alcohol and expect that he would drink himself to death in no time. Malloy, unaware of the plot, accepted the offer eagerly, taking full advantage of what seemed to be unexpected generosity. Night after night, Malloy drank without restraint, downing drink after drink. But to the conspirators' frustration, Malloy returned each day asking for more, seemingly unaffected by the alcohol's effects. What they assumed would be a quick way to profit turned into a costly endeavor. As their attempts to get Malloy to drink himself to death continued to fail, the conspirators moved to more dangerous methods. Frustrated by Malloy's apparent immunity to alcohol, they began serving him wood alcohol. This is an industrial-grade form of alcohol that is toxic to humans. In theory, even a small amount should have been fatal. But Michael Malloy, seemingly indestructible, drank the wood alcohol without hesitation, and much to the group's amazement, no signs of distress. The men watched in disbelief as Malloy just kept returning day after day. So then they concoct increasingly outlandish methods because it's not working. They feed him the tainted food with deadly substances. They started with those raw oysters. They soaked them in the wood alcohol, but that failed also. Then they give him the sandwich with the metal shavings. Still does not work, does not rip up his insides. For the murder trust, Malloy's resilience had shifted from this inconvenience to something personal, and in their frustration, their methods became more absurd. They were determined to find something that would eventually overpower Malloy. Their fixation on his death was fueled by the financial promise of the insurance policies, and they seemed willing to go to any lengths to achieve their goal. As Malloy's ability to survive each attempt continued to baffle them, the conspirators realized they were losing control, but their desperation only fueled them to escalate their methods further, undeterred by the repeated failures. With each failed attempt, they got more brutal. When poisoning him with wood alcohol and then feeding him tainted food did not work, that's when they decided to subject Malloy to extreme cold. One freezing winter night, they waited until Malloy was unconscious from the drink. Then they carried him outside and they laid him in the snow. Then they doused him in cold water, and they left him there, exposed to the elements, confident he would not survive that night. But then once again, he defies the odds, and the next day he's at the speakeasy as usual, asking for a drink. The conspirators were stunned, but their resolve to kill Malloy remained strong, determined to finish the job. They moved on to even more drastic measures. They decided to stage an accident, hoping that a tragic hit and run would be more effective. They hired a cab driver who struck Malloy with the car and left him for dead. However, this didn't end Malloy's life. After a few days of recovery, he returned to the speakeasy yet again, seemingly unscathed, completely unaware of the conspiracy around him. This bizarre series of failed attempts on Malloy's life not only shocked the conspirators, but also pushed them to a breaking point. What had started out as a simple plan was quickly becoming a surreal ordeal. They began to wonder if they would ever succeed, and whether Malloy's survival was a matter of sheer luck or something more. In the face of each failure, they grew more desperate, determined to end his life, not just for the money, but now seemingly to prove that they could. After multiple failed attempts, the conspirators finally did succeed. Their final method was both simple and brutal: carbon monoxide poisoning. They waited until Malloy was unconscious from drinking, then took him to a nearby room, connected a hose to a gas pipe, and allowed the deadly gas to fill the room. This time, Malloy did not survive. The murder trust members believed they had finally ended his life, and they prepared to claim the insurance money. However, their plan unraveled when the insurance companies grew suspicious due to the unusual number of policies taken out on Malloy by the same group. Investigators began to dig into circumstances of Malloy's death and soon uncovered the truth about the series of attempts made on his life. The police requested Marino, Murphy, Squaw, Green, Kreisberg, and the twisted details of their plot quickly spread through the media. Dubbed the Murder Trust, the group became infamous, and the public was horrified at their relentless attempts to kill an innocent man for profit. The trial that followed exposed the men's ruthless actions and left a permanent stain on their reputations. All 5 were convicted, with 3 of them receiving the death penalty. Malloy's endurance and the conspirators' unrelenting greed turned this case into a national spectacle. The story of greed and desperation and resilience forced society to confront the darker aspects of human nature. Michael Malloy's life may have been taken, but his story endures as one of the most bizarre and tragic tales in true crime history. In court, the prosecution focused on the conspirators' greed and the cold-blooded nature of their actions. They argued that each man's role in the plot against Malloy was calculated and driven solely by financial gain. The prosecution presented evidence showing that Marino, Murphy, Pasqua, Green, and Kreisberg had taken out multiple life insurance policies on Malloy, indicating that their intentions went beyond a simple plan. These guys were determined to profit from Malloy's death, no matter how long it took. The prosecutor emphasized that despite multiple failed attempts, the conspirators showed no remorse, only frustration at their lack of success. The prosecution also highlighted the callousness of the plot, describing how the men repeatedly exposed Malloy to life-threatening situations, only to continue with new, more extreme measures when each attempt failed. Witnesses testified to seeing the men serve Malloy poisoned alcohol and tainted food, and hearing them joke about his invincibility. The prosecutor argued that the group's behavior revealed an utter disregard for human life, underscoring their lack of moral conscience. They contended that rather than abandoning their scheme after failed attempts, they escalated their efforts, indicating a level of depravity that warranted the harshest possible punishment. The prosecution painted a picture of men so blinded by desperation and greed that they were willing to sacrifice their humanity to achieve their goal. By focusing on the brutality and persistence of their actions, the prosecution aimed to convince the jury that these men were not just opportunists, they were ruthless killers who saw Malloy as a disposable obstacle to their financial aspirations. This argument was clear. This was a premeditated murder plot, and justice demanded a severe response. But these guys also had their defense. This attempted to portray the conspirators as victims of their own circumstances. They were driven to desperation by the economic hardships of the Great Depression. They argued that the men were not career criminals. No way. These were men that under normal circumstances would never have considered murder. The defense's narrative sought to humanize the defendants and emphasize they were struggling to survive in an era marked by poverty and uncertainty. And in this light, the plot was presented not as an act of pure evil, but this was a tragic misstep born out of despair. The defense further contended that the conspirators never intended for the plot to go this far. According to their attorneys, the men initially hoped Malloy would just drink himself to death naturally. That's where he was headed. But each failed attempt led them further down a path of no return. By this argument, the defense framed the series of attempts on Malloy's life as a slippery slope, a situation that spiraled out of control as the men became increasingly frustrated and irrational. They argued that each escalation, it wasn't necessarily premeditated. It was rather a reaction to the group's mounting desperation. With every failure, they grew more desperate. Additionally, the defense suggested that the men were not mentally prepared for the psychological toll of murder. Because if you didn't know anyone that commits murder, They're never ready for how they feel afterwards, and it can determine a lot of things. They argued here that while the defendant's actions were morally wrong, they were more a result of impulsive behavior and economic strain than inherent cruelty. In their view, the men lacked the cold calculation attributed to them by the prosecution, and their poor choices stemmed from a combination of depression, fear, and poor judgment. By highlighting the defendant's personal struggles, the defense sought to elicit sympathy from the jury, arguing that while they should be held accountable, they did not deserve the harshest punishment. In response, the prosecution maintained that financial hardship could not justify the cruelty and persistence of this group's actions. They argued that while the men may have faced difficult times, so did millions of others during the Depression. Yet most did not resort to murder for financial gain. The prosecution contended that economic desperation alone could not excuse the inhumane lengths these men went to, nor did it diminish the brutality of their repeated attempts on Malloy's life. They pointed out that, far from acting out of momentary desperation, the conspirators meticulously planned each attempt, going so far as to hire a driver for a staged hit-and-run. To counter the defense's portrayal of the plot as an act that spiraled out of control, the prosecution highlighted the deliberate nature of each step in this conspiracy. They presented evidence showing that the conspirators methodically explored increasingly lethal methods after each failed attempt, demonstrating a premeditated intent to kill. They argued that the group had numerous opportunities to abandon the plot, but chose to continue, each decision reflecting a lack of remorse and a chilling disregard for Malloy's life. The prosecution also addressed the psychological aspect of the crime. They argued that the men's ability to joke about Malloy's endurance and their apparent frustration at his survival revealed a level of detachment inconsistent with mere desperation. To the prosecution, these were not impulsive actions taken in the heat of the moment. They were cold, calculated decisions made over time, pointing to a level of moral degradation beyond ordinary criminal behavior. The prosecution's argument was clear. These men were not victims of circumstances. These men were perpetrators of a cruel and relentless scheme, and it demanded full accountability. This case, Michael Malloy, it stirred a lasting debate over moral boundaries and the effects of desperation and the true nature of justice. The case's darkly absurd elements captured national attention as people struggled to even comprehend the extent of these conspirators' cruelty. At a time when the public was well acquainted with hardship, the men's actions represented a level of ruthlessness that went beyond mere survival. Many found it very difficult to believe that economic hardship could drive people to such repeated attempts on someone else's life. This disbelief fueled a nationwide conversation on the moral boundaries of survival. The public was divided in their judgment of the conspirators. Some argued that, given the hardships of the Great Depression, desperate individuals might resort to extreme measures that would never be considered under normal circumstances. However, others saw the men's actions as inexcusable, viewing their cruelty as a product of greed and moral decay. Malloy's death became a symbol of the darker side of human desperation, raising questions about how far people might go when they're pushed to their limits. The case also challenged society to confront the uncomfortable reality of human nature. While some expressed sympathy for the conspirators' situation, many were disturbed by the apparent lack of empathy and remorse shown by the group. The conspirators' repeated attempts, coupled with their cavalier attitude toward Malloy's life, sparked questions about whether extreme economic conditions could justify actions that so clearly violated moral and social norms. The public grappled with these questions, caught between understanding the pressures of the Depression and condemning the men's heartlessness. The media played a role, covering Michael Malloy's case. It was instrumental in shaping public perception, turning it into both a national scandal and also a darkly fascinating story. Newspapers sensationalized the absurdity of Malloy's survival, coining the nickname of Iron Mike to capture his near superhuman endurance. Each failed attempt became a headline, and the public followed along with morbid curiosity as the details of the murder plot emerged. The media's portrayal highlighted the case's surreal elements, framing it as part dark comedy, part tragic moral tale. This angle captivated audiences, but it also sparked controversy over the way this case was presented. Some critics argue the media's coverage trivialized the severity of this crime, making it seem more like a twisted comedy, but not a brutal murder. They believe that the focus on Malloy's resilience and the conspirators' repeated failures risked overshadowing the tragic reality of this man's death. The sensationalism, they argued, downplayed the suffering that Malloy endured and treated the case as entertainment rather than a moral issue. This criticism opened a debate on the ethics of crime reporting, particularly in cases involving tragic or absurd elements. We still see this all happen today. The public's fascination with Malloy's resilience created a tension between viewing the case as a cautionary tale about human cruelty and seeing it as a bizarre story of survival against all odds. The media's framing forced readers to confront this tension, with some seeing Malloy's survival as a form of poetic justice, and others laminating that the focus on his endurance overshadowed the true horror of the conspirators' actions. And this clash of perspectives revealed society's discomfort with reconciling the absurdity of this case with its tragic outcome. People don't like dealing with this kind of thing. And the Michael Malloy case remains a reminder to this day of how complex it gets when we throw human behavior into things, especially law, especially under extreme conditions. Human behavior, psyche, it always comes into play, and it becomes the confusing and hard, challenging part of it. This case forces society to confront the truth that reality can be uncomfortable. And under certain circumstances, people may act out in ways that defy reason and empathy. This case challenges us to reflect on how we view justice and the factors that shape our moral choices. And could something like this happen again? And if so, what does it say about the potential for darkness within society's depths? Are we trying to get better? How far along are we? Will we ever get better at cases like this? The questions remain open-ended, a testament to the case's enduring impact on public consciousness. So as we reach the end of this chilling story, we're left to reflect on the Michael Malloy case and the questions it poses about morality and greed and the lengths to which people will go when desperation takes hold. Malloy's tragic death is a reminder of the darkest sides of human nature, but it also challenges us to confront our own beliefs when we're looking at justice. Was the court's ruling enough? Or should more have been done to hold the conspirators accountable for their relentless attempts to end a man's life for their own profit? Some argue that justice was served, that the sentences handed down to the murder trust fit the severity of their actions. Others feel conflicted and wonder if society has a role in examining the conditions that led to such a shocking crime more closely. Was this just a case of moral failing? Was it the product of a society that was struggling through one of its darkest economic times? The answers aren't simple, and they leave us with haunting questions about the balance between justice and empathy and punishment. So now I turn it over to you. Imagine yourself on the jury, hearing the details of each failed attempt, the chilling disregard for Malloy's life, and the lengths these men went to in pursuing financial gain here. Do you feel justice was served with their sentences? Were the death penalties and prison terms an inadequate response to the calculated cruelty of the murder trust, or should the court have approached the case differently? Perhaps with a focus on the social conditions that may have influenced their actions. Any human can be influenced. Where does that responsibility lie with individuals and society? This case isn't just about Malloy or the men who killed him. It's about the troubling reality that extreme circumstances can drive people to acts that defy our understanding of right and wrong. As we close this chapter on the life and tragic end of Michael Malloy, I invite you to weigh the facts and consider the implications and ask yourself, did justice truly prevail? Or is there more to be understood about the forces that drive people to such dark places? Thank you for joining me here in True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. Stay safe out there. Stay curious. Ask the difficult questions. And until next time, this is Alexis Knight.